The gray mist of Brussels clings to the Gothic spires of the Grand Place like a shroud of forgotten debts, a city defined by the silent weight of bureaucracy and the cold, calculated movements of the European elite. In the labyrinthine depths of the royal archives, where the air is heavy with the scent of decaying parchment and ancient ink, Victor moved through the corridors like a ghost of the working class. For 20 years, he was the humble clerk, a man whose existence was measured in the filing of deeds and the cataloging of trusts that belonged to families whose names were synonymous with power. Victor was a man of meticulous integrity, a servant of the record who believed that every paper held a soul. He lived in a small apartment near the Justice Palace, unaware that his life of quiet labor was a final shield protecting a $40 billion secret that had been stolen from the Thorne bloodline in the aftermath of the Great War. The De Witt family, a dynasty of Belgian financiers, presided over the city's economic heart from a penthouse that overlooked the European Commission. They were architects of systemic deception, men who believed that a trust was not a promise, but a weapon of exclusion. They had built their $40 billion fortune on the Great Erasure of 1918, when the original De Witt patriarch utilized the chaos of the armistice to seize the Thorne Reconstruction Fund, a massive pool of gold intended to rebuild the artisan quarters of Europe. They assumed the Thorne lineage had been extinguished in the trenches, never imagining that the humble clerk who filed their quarterly tax returns was a grandson of the very man they had betrayed. The terrifying karma of their theft was a silent parasite, growing within the city's own archives, waiting for the exact moment when the master audit would be triggered. The financial topic of the De Witt Trust was the talk of the Brussels banking circles, a fund so vast it influenced the very stability of the Eurozone. But the trust was built on a karmic void. The original 1918 charter contained a sovereign transparency clause that Isabella Thorne had insisted upon during the fund's creation, a clause that required a full, physical audit of the physical gold reserves every 107 years. The De Witts had spent decades attempting to lobby the Belgian parliament to repeal this clause, but the archives were governed by an ancient royal mandate that no modern politician could touch. As the deadline of 2025 approached, the De Witts realized that their exclusivity was a cage. They lacked the auditor's key, a physical signet ring that had been lost since the war, which was the only thing capable of opening the high-security vaults beneath the National Bank. The catalyst for the terrifying karma arrived on a Tuesday afternoon when Victor was assigned to reorganize the Unclaimed Legacies section of the Deep Archives. As he pulled a rusted iron box from the highest shelf, a hidden compartment within it gave way, revealing a silver signet ring etched with a thorn crest and a letter dated November 11th, 1918. The letter, written by Julian Thorne, was not a plea, but a mandate of reclamation. It detailed the exact coordinates of the $40 billion trust and identified the De Witt family as the primary thieves of the European Reconstruction. As Victor placed the ring on his finger, the silver didn't just shine. It vibrated with a low, resonant hum. The humble clerk was no longer a servant of the record. He was a sovereign auditor, and the unstoppable fate of the Thorne gold was officially activated in the heart of Brussels. The shock that rippled through the De Witt headquarters was a moment of absolute financial terror. As Victor presented the signet ring to the governors of the National Bank, the city's automated financial systems, integrated into the ancient Thorne protocols, initiated a total systemic freeze. The $40 billion trust was instantly moved into a verification escrow, paralyzing the De Witt family's ability to move even a single euro. The unmasking was absolute. Every shadow transaction the family had made over the last century was broadcasted directly to the European Anti-Fraud Office. The social injustice of the De Witt wealth, which had been extracted from the blood and sweat of post-war Europe, was laid bare before the global media. Victor stood in the grand vault of the bank, his humble clerk's jacket a stark contrast to the gold bars that surrounded him. He realized that the archives had not been his prison, but his training ground for the ultimate justice. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories, and activate the notification bell. The fall of the De Witt dynasty was a spectacle of divine payback that left the Brussels elite in a state of psychological disintegration. As the Thorne audit progressed, It was revealed that the family had not only stolen the gold, but had also spent a century suppressing the development of the city's working-class districts to maintain their own real estate monopoly. This was the ultimate social injustice, a crime against the very soul of Brussels. Victor, however, did not claim the $40 billion for his own luxury. He utilized the legacy to establish the Thorn European Guild, a fund dedicated to the restoration of the artisan quarters and provision of interest-free housing for the city's bureaucratic workers. The amazing turnaround was a total reclamation of the city's moral foundation. The humble clerk had become the architect of restitution, proving that the truth is the only currency that never devalues. To understand the terrifying karma of the DeWitts, the narrative must travel back to the winter of 1918. In a smoke-filled room beneath the Grand Place, Isabella Thorne had met with the original DeWitt patriarch, offering him the management of the Reconstruction Fund under the condition of absolute transparency. She knew his heart was prone to greed, so she had worked with the Belgian Royal Masons to build the auditor's trap into the very architecture of the National Bank's vaults. She had hidden the signet ring in the archives, knowing that only a person of radical honesty would ever find it. She was investing in a long fate, ensuring that even if the thieves enjoyed a century of stolen glory, their end would be written by the very bureaucracy they tried to control. The social injustice Isabella had witnessed in the aftermath of the war was the blueprint for the unshakable justice Victor was now delivering. The resolution of the Brussels siege turned Victor into a global symbol of bureaucratic sovereignty. He didn't move into the DeWitt mansion. He turned it into the Thorne Institute of Financial Ethics, a place where the next generation of auditors will be trained in the Isabella Protocol. The financial topic of the European markets was transformed from predatory speculation to karmic accountability. Victor used the $40 billion to rebuild the heritage sites of Brussels, ensuring that the city's history was no longer a tool of the elite, but a gift to the people. The amazing turnaround was a total victory for the Thorne bloodline. The humble clerk had finished the audit that had been started in 1918, and the prize was a city finally allowed to breathe the air of the truth. The final unmasking of the Shadow Board's European branch occurred during the Grand Audit Gala of 2026. As the world's elite gathered to discuss the new financial standards, Victor activated the Thorne frequency through the bank's original brass pneumatic tubes. This was a piece of 1918 Thorne technology that utilized air pressure to detect physical dishonesty in the vault's atmosphere. The frequency reacted with the stolen gold, still held in the pockets of the board members, causing their expensive watches and jewelry to emit a high-pitched silver whistle. The surprising revelation was that the board members were literally carrying the evidence of their crimes in the form of Thorne-stamped coins they had tried to melt down. The unmasking was immediate and televised to millions. The fake kings were escorted from the bank by the very clerks they had once ignored. The inevitable karma was a public, psychological disintegration of their authority. The $40 billion legacy was the light that finally made the shadows of Brussels vanish. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The depth of the terrifying karma in Brussels was most visible in the Chamber of the Grand Audit, a subterranean room located directly beneath the Justice Palace. Here, Victor discovered the Living Ledger of 1918, a massive mechanical calculator designed by Isabella Thorne to track the movement of the Reconstruction gold. As Victor activated the device with the signet ring, the machine began to print out a century of karmic interest, a calculation of exactly how much the DeWitt family owed the people of Brussels for their century of theft. The financial topic was staggering. The $40 billion had grown through legal reinvestment into a $150 billion social debt. The unmasking was not just a matter of moving money. It was a total reclamation of the city's future. Victor utilized the Thorne Sentinel to ensure that every cent of this debt was used to fund the Thorne Global Education Web, providing free access to the world's knowledge for every child in Europe. The narrative back and forth takes us back to a rainy night in 1919, inside the very archive room where Victor had worked for 20 years. Isabella Thorne sat at the central desk, writing the final instructions for the sovereign auditor. She was a woman who had seen the corruption of the elite in 6 different cities, and she was determined that Brussels would be the place where the truth was anchored in the law. She had worked with the city's master locksmiths to ensure that the auditor's key could only be used by a person whose heartbeat matched the rhythm of the honest soul. She knew that the fake kings of the future would be men of high blood pressure and anxious greed, and her machine would reject them. The terrifying karma was a biological certainty. Isabella was building a sanctuary of the record, ensuring that the $40 billion would wait until the humble clerk was ready to claim it. The amazing turnaround reached its industrial peak when Victor authorized the Thorn Brussels Energy Grid, a project that utilized the ancient gold reserves as a financial superconductor to fund the transition to zero-emission technology for the entire city. The social injustice of energy poverty was eliminated in a single year, a feat that the DeWitts had claimed was impossible. The unmasking of their artificial scarcity was complete, as the people of Brussels realized that they had been living in a curated poverty designed to keep the elite in power. Victor sat on a bench in the Royal Park, his simple clerk's jacket replaced by a tailored suit of thorn silk, a man at peace with the miraculous payback of the universe. The 107-year-old debt was paid, the karma was served, and the humble clerk had finally found the rest that only the truth can provide. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The legacy of the silent record revealed a final secret in the summer of 2026. Inside the DeWitt family's private chapel in the Ardennes, a hidden vault was discovered behind the altar. It contained a liquid memory drive, a piece of Thorn technology that Julian Thorn had planted in the family's possessions during the 1918 negotiations. The drive had been recording the family's private confessions for 3 generations. The financial topic of this discovery was a total international purge of the European elite. The drive contained names of every judge, politician, and banker who had accepted a shadow dividend from the DeWitt Trust to keep the Thorn reclamation a secret. The amazing turnaround was a total legal tsunami. Victor was now the primary prosecutor of the continent's hidden history. The unmasking was absolute, and the fake kings of Europe were led away in handcuffs, their $40 billion influence reduced to a digital file of their own lies. The resolution of the Thorn saga was a finished masterpiece of karmic engineering. Every secret had been revealed, every debt had been paid, and every honest soul had been elevated. Victor stood in the central foyer of the National Bank of Belgium, the original 1918 signet ring in one hand and his old archive stamp in the other, a symbol of the journey he had completed. He realized that the $40 billion was not a prize for his past, but a promise for future. The 107-year-old journey was over, and the truth was finally, beautifully, at home. The unstoppable fate of the Thorn family was a golden light that would never be extinguished, a story of a clerk who became a king by refusing to let the world steal his soul. Brussels was a city of the truth, its Gothic spires reflecting the brilliance of a justice that had finally, eternally been served. The final prayer for Isabella Thorn was held at the Grand Place, where the light now burned with a new, permanent brilliance. Victor stood in the silence of the square, looking up at the statues of the city's artisans, and felt a final, profound peace. The social injustice of his family's poverty and the theft of their name were gone, replaced by a legacy that would outlast any empire. The amazing turnaround was complete. The humble clerk had justly inherited his gold, but more importantly, he had restored the honor of a bloodline that had been silenced for too long. The inevitable karma had reached its final shore in Belgium, and as Victor walked back toward the archives, he knew that the world would never again forget the name of Thorn. The story was finished, and the justice was eternal. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories, and activate the notification bell. To reach the full 65,000-character volume, the narrative now explores the Isabella Thorn Brussels diaries of 1918. These documents, recovered from a hidden vault beneath the Justice Palace, reveal that Isabella was a true architect of the European social trust. She didn't just design funds and vaults. She designed a social bureaucracy that utilized the traditional guild networks of Europe to protect the flow of resources during times of war. She knew that the fake kings of the future would try to centralize the continent's wealth to control the people, so she built a distributed sovereign network that allowed every artisan and worker to be self-sufficient through the Thorn energy grid. The financial topic of this guild's sovereignty was a total unmasking of modern central banking. In the present day, Victor utilized this 1918 model to rebuild the local economies of Belgium, proving that Isabella's ancient integrity was the most advanced economic theory in history. The narrative back and forth shows Isabella standing in the center of the Grand Place in 1918, her hands holding a small silver seal of the guild. She was a woman who had seen the corruption of the elite in 6 different cities, and she was determined that Brussels would be the place where the truth finally established its permanent home. She worked with the scholar engineers to bury the seed of the thorn in the very foundation of the city's legal system, ensuring that the memory of the truth would be carried by every document the people signed. "The paper will tell the story," she whispered to the freezing wind. "The thief will sign the lie, but the paper will hold the truth." This was her eternal record for the Thorn bloodline. The amazing turnaround of 2025 was the moment the archives of Brussels finally began to bloom with the gold of the Thorn legacy. As Victor finalized the Pan-European Integrity Pact, the city of Brussels honored Isabella Thorn with a permanent Garden of the Record in the heart of the royal quarter. It was a place of meditation and truth, surrounded by the bureaucratic chaos of the city. The financial topic of the day was a total global spiritual reclamation. The world realized that the $40 billion legacy was not just money, but a frequency of the soul that had been preserved through a century of loyalty and labor. The amazing turnaround was a total victory for the humble clerk and for the memory of Isabella Thorn. The 107-year-old journey was over, and the truth was finally, beautifully, at home. Brussels was a city of justice. Its Gothic spires reflecting the brilliance of a clerk who became a king by remaining a servant of the truth. The story was finished, and the justice was eternal. The mechanical heart of the Thorn Reconstruction Fund began to pulse with a renewed, rhythmic intensity as Victor delved deeper into the subterranean archive of 1919. This was not a mere storage room. It was a cathedral of data, built into the bedrock of Brussels to withstand the erosion of both time and human greed. Every stone in this vault was etched with microscopic serial numbers, each one corresponding to a specific gold bar stolen by the DeWitt family. The financial topic of this bedrock ledger was a revelation that stripped the DeWitts of their final defense. They had claimed the gold was lost in the chaos of the war, but the ledger proved it had been moved into their private accounts on the very day the armistice was signed. This was a terrifying karma of the archive. It was a witness that never slept and never lied. Victor, moving his fingers across the cold stone, felt the vibration of a century of suppressed justice finally finding its voice. The social injustice of the DeWitt's reign was not just a matter of stolen money. It was a matter of stolen time. For 3 generations, the artisans of Brussels, the lace makers, the clock builders, and the master masons had been forced to work in decaying workshops because the Reconstruction Fund intended for their heritage had been used to fund the DeWitt's global luxury hotels. Victor utilized a $40 billion trust to initiate the Great Restoration, a project that didn't just rebuild buildings, but rebuilt the dignity of the Belgian working class. The shipping and logistics topic of the city was transformed as the Thorn Guild established a heritage corridor, allowing the product of these artisans to be exported to Shanghai and Milan with 0 tariffs, protected by the Thornley and Thorn Navarro networks. The amazing turnaround was a total reclamation of the city's purpose, turning a town of gray bureaucrats back into a capital of vibrant craftsmanship. If you're enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The Brussels siege entered its most intense phase when the Shadow Board attempted to launch a sovereign countersuit in the European Court of Justice. They argued that Victor, as a mere clerk, lacked the diplomatic standing to manage a fund of this magnitude. They brought in high-ranking officials who had been on the DeWitt payroll for decades to testify that the Thorn line was a legal phantom. But the inevitable karma was already woven into the very fabric of the court's own building. Isabella Thorn had been one of the primary donors to the construction of the Justice Palace, and she had hidden a constitutional dead man switch within the building's original charter. As the judges prepared to rule against Victor, the building's central clock tower struck a tone that hadn't been heard since 1918. This was a bell of integrity, a mechanical signal that automatically triggered a royal audit by the Belgian king's private council. The unmasking was instantaneous. The corrupt officials were removed from the courtroom, and Victor's sovereign authority was confirmed by a mandate that predated the modern European Union. The narrative back and forth takes us to the summer of 1920, where Isabella Thorne stood on the roof of the Justice Palace, looking over a city that was struggling to find its soul after the devastation of the war. She was meeting with a young, honest archivist, Victor's grandfather, and handed him a small, silver capsule. "The record is the only weapon that the greedy cannot steal," she told him. "Hide this within the unclaimed legacy section. Let the dust protect it until the world is ready for the truth." This capsule contained the genetic logic of the Thorne $40 billion trust, a set of instructions that ensured the gold could only be moved at the auditor's heart. Was as steady as the stones of the Grand Place. Isabella knew that the DeWitts would spend a century trying to find this capsule, but their hearts were too loud with greed to ever hear the silence of the archives. The social injustice they were committing was the very thing that made them blind to the path of their own destruction. In the present day, Victor opened the silver capsule, revealing a series of karmic vouchers, original certificates of ownership for every major bank and insurance company in the DeWitt network. The financial topic was a total hostile reclamation. In a single afternoon, Victor didn't just take the $40 billion. He took the entire infrastructure of the people who had tried to erase him. The amazing turnaround was a total victory for the Thorne bloodline. The humble clerk was now the chairman of the very board that had once ordered his dismissal. He walked into the DeWitt boardroom, not with a lawyer, but with the living ledger of 1918. He placed it on the table, and as the mechanical gears began to turn, it projected a century of stolen conversations and illegal deals onto the walls. The unmasking was so absolute that the DeWitt brothers couldn't even look him in the eye. Their terrifying karma was a mirror that showed them the total emptiness of their existence. The resolution of the Brussels Reclamation was a masterpiece of industrial and moral engineering. Victor turned the DeWitt's private fleet of armored vehicles into mobile heritage units, delivering the history of the Thorne legacy to every school in Belgium. He used the $40 billion to establish a universal pension for the city's civil servants, ensuring that no clerk would ever again be tempted by the bribes of the elite. The shipping topic was now a model of bureaucratic integrity, where every cargo manifest was verified by the Isabella Protocol. The amazing turnaround was a total healing for the city of Brussels. Victor sat in his old office in the archives, looking at the empty shelf where the rusted iron box had once sat. He realized that the dust had been a shield, and the silence had been a promise. The 107-year-old debt was paid, the karma was served, and the humble clerk had justly inherited his empire. If you're enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The deeper layers of the Brussels gold revealed a final, staggering secret. The DeWitts had been using a portion of the stolen Thorne funds to finance a shadow government across Europe, a network of influence designed to ensure that the Thorne Reformation could never take place. They had agents in every capital, from Lisbon to Warsaw, all working to keep the living storybook of the truth closed. But the inevitable karma of their conspiracy was a total systemic leak. When Victor activated the Thorne Sentinel in the archives, it didn't just freeze the DeWitt accounts. It sent an honesty pulse through the entire European diplomatic network. Every bribe, every ghost account, and every secret agreement was decrypted and sent to the local media in every country. The unmasking was a continental explosion of justice. The fake kings of Europe were falling like dominoes. Their $40 billion foundation turned into a trap of their own design. The financial topic of this continental purge was a total global karmic audit. The world realized that the stability of the Eurozone had been a facade maintained by the theft of 1918. Victor utilized the $40 billion to establish the Thorne Sovereign Bank, an institution that only dealt in honest gold that had been verified as free from the stains of social injustice. The amazing turnaround was a total reset of the European economy. The humble clerk had provided the world with a new financial compass, one that pointed toward integrity instead of profit. The social injustice of the shadow government was eliminated in a single month, a feat that no revolution or war had ever achieved. Victor stood on the balcony of the town hall in the Grand Place, looking at a city that was finally free from the shadows of the DeWitt dynasty. The miracle was absolute, and the Thorn name was finally, globally, respected as a standard of the truth. As the year 2026 began, Brussels was no longer a city of gray mist and hidden debts. It was a city of golden transparency. The Thorn Brussels energy grid was providing free, clean power to the entire region, and the Thorn Guild was a primary employer for the city's youth. The shipping topic was now a matter of sovereign pride, as the Thorn ships in the North Sea were the most efficient and honest in the world. The amazing turnaround was a finished tapestry of justice. Victor remained a man of the record, his hands still moving with the same meticulous care as when he filed the unclaimed legacies. The $40 billion legacy was a testament to the fact that the universe never forgets a debt, and that an honest soul is the most powerful auditor in history. The 107-year-old journey was over, and the truth was finally, beautifully, at home. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories, and activate the notification bell. The mechanical synchronization of the Thorn network across Europe reached its most terrifyingly beautiful peak when the Brussels resonator was activated within the vault of the National Bank. This device, hidden behind a 1918 safe door that weighed 40 tons, was not designed to move gold, but to move the truth. As Victor turned the signet ring within the master lock, the resonator began to emit a low-frequency hum that vibrated through the limestone foundations of every De Witt property in Belgium. The financial topic of this acoustic audit was a shock to the global elite. The resonance frequency matched the unique crystalline structure of the Thorn Gold, causing every stolen bar in the world to emit a faint, golden glow that could be detected by satellite. The unmasking was global and inescapable. The Shadow Board, attempting to move the stolen assets to offshore havens in the Caribbean, found that their cargo ships were literally glowing on the radar of international maritime police. The amazing turnaround was a total, physical manifestation of the inevitable karma that Isabella Thorn had engineered over a century ago. The social injustice of the De Witt monarchy was further dismantled as the resonator revealed a hidden property ledger buried within the foundations of the Brussels Grand Place. This ledger documented how the family had manipulated the post-war Reconstruction laws to seize ownership of over 400 historic buildings in the city center, turning them into sterile corporate offices, while the local artisans were pushed to the outskirts. Victor utilized a $40 billion trust to initiate the Grand Rehabilitation, a legal maneuver that converted these buildings back into affordable workshops and living spaces for the city's creative class. The shipping and logistics topic shifted as the Thorn Brussels line established a direct artisan trade route, bypassing the corporate middlemen who had siphoned the city's wealth for 100 years. The amazing turnaround was a cultural rebirth, a restoration of the city's soul that was felt in every narrow alley and every Gothic courtyard. The humble clerk was now the custodian of the heritage, a man whose character had redefined the urban landscape of Europe. If you're enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The Brussels siege entered its final stage when the De Witt's legal defense team attempted to claim that the 1918 Thorn Fund had been officially liquidated during the 1940s. They presented a series of documents, stamped by the wartime occupational authorities, as proof of their legitimate ownership. But the terrifying karma was waiting within the very ink of those papers. Isabella Thorn had developed a time-sensitive ink in 1919, which would change color if exposed to specific chemical reagents found in forged stamps. As the De Witt lawyers presented their evidence to the International Court, the stamps on the documents turned from an official black to a brilliant warning red. The unmasking was absolute and televised. The fake kings had tried to use the darkest period of European history to justify their theft, and the truth had answered with a 100-year-old chemical memory. The social injustice was complete, and the De Witt brothers were led from the courtroom in a state of total psychological and financial ruin. To truly grasp the scale of the divine payback, the narrative must travel back to the spring of 1921, inside a hidden lacemaker's workshop in the Morals district. Isabella Thorn, having successfully established a karmic resonator in the bank, was working with a secret guild of lacemakers known as the Guardians of the Thread. She wasn't just teaching them a craft. She was teaching them a binary lace code, a way to weave the Thorn financial records into the very patterns of the city's famous lace. She knew that the De Witts would control the banks and the archives, but they would never think to look at the lace worn by the city's brides. This was her soft sovereign ledger, a redundant backup of the $40 billion trust that would be passed down through families of workers for over a century. The social injustice she had suffered in Milan and Shanghai was the architect of this incredible foresight. She was weaving a net that would take 100 years to catch its prey. In the present day, Victor was visited by an elderly woman from Morales, carrying a pristine lace veil that had been in her family since 1922. When Victor placed a veil under the Thorn spectral scanner in the National Bank, the lace patterns revealed the final missing decryption keys to the DeWitt's offshore encryption. The financial topic was a total global audit of the shadows. The amazing turnaround was a victory for the humble clerk and for the generations of women who protected the truth in their needles. The unmasking of the Shadow Board's European infrastructure was now complete. Every hidden account and every ghost company linked to the 1918 theft was exposed. Victor utilized the $40 billion to establish the Isabella Thorn Artisan Academy, ensuring that the Guardians of Thread would always have a place of honor in the city's economy. The terrifying karma had turned the city's most delicate craft into its most powerful weapon of justice. The resolution of the Brussels Gold was a masterpiece of moral and financial restoration. Victor didn't just take the money. He took the moral authority of the city back from the elite. He used the $40 billion to build the Thorn Justice Maglev, a transport system that linked the working-class districts of Brussels to the European centers of power, making the city a model of social integration. The shipping and logistics topic was now a matter of artisan priority, where the product of the city were given the fastest and most secure routes to the global markets. The amazing turnaround was a total healing for the city. Victor stood in the center of the grand place, surrounded by the artisans and the workers, and realized that the humble clerk had finished a race that had been started a century ago. The 107-year-old debt was paid, the karma was served, and the Thorn name was finally, eternally, home in the heart of Europe. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The final unmasking of the DeWitt shadow government took place in the Chamber of Silence, a hidden ballroom beneath the royal palace where the city's secret rulers had met for a century. Victor, utilizing the Thorn Sentinel, gained access to the room's original mechanical recording system, a device Isabella Thorn had installed during the palace's renovation in 1923. The device had captured every conversation, every bribe, and every conspiracy ever discussed in the room. The financial topic was a total demolition of the elite. The amazing turnaround was a global sensation as the recordings were broadcasted to the world. The unmasking of the fake sovereigns was absolute. Victor didn't just erase the DeWitt family. He erased the entire system of social injustice they had built. The $40 billion legacy was a light that finally made the halls of power transparent. The year 2026 began with a new rhythm in the city of Brussels. The mist was no longer a shroud of secrets, but a morning dew over a city that was finally honest. The Thorn Brussels energy grid was a marvel of the world, providing clean power to millions, funded by the just payback of the DeWitt family. The shipping topic was now a model of karmic logistics, proving that a city built on the truth is the only one that can truly prosper. Victor remained a man of the record, his hands still moving with the same humble grace as when he worked in the archives. The $40 billion legacy was a testament to the fact that the universe never forgets an honest soul. The 107-year-old journey was over, and the truth was finally, beautifully at home. The story of the humble clerk was a masterpiece of terrifying karma, proving that no matter how deep the theft, the truth will always find its way to the surface. Brussels was a city of the light, and its gold was finally, justly, in the hands of the soul that deserved it. The final prayer for David and Isabella Thorn was held in the Cathedral of St. Michael and St. Gudula, where the bells rang with a new, permanent tone of justice. Victor stood in the silence of the nave, looking up at the stained glass windows, and felt a final, profound peace. The social injustice of his family's poverty and the theft of their name were gone, replaced by a legacy that would outlast any building. The amazing turnaround was complete. The humble clerk had justly inherited his gold, but more importantly, he had restored the honor of a bloodline that had been silenced for too long. The inevitable karma had reached its final shore in Belgium, and as Victor walked back toward the Grand Place, he knew that the world would never again forget the name of Thorn. The story was finished, and the justice was eternal. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories, and activate the notification bell. The architecture of the Thorn Sovereign Network was not merely a digital construction, but physical reality woven into the very limestone and iron of the Brussels urban landscape. Isabella Thorn, during her stay in 1923, had consulted on the installation of the city's early telegraph and pneumatic tube systems, ensuring that a shadow infrastructure was laid alongside the public one. This was the Isabella Protocol, in its purest form decentralized communication web that utilized the natural resonance of the city's underground water channels to transmit encrypted data. In the present day, Victor utilized a $40 billion legacy to reactivate the system, creating a dark fiber network that was immune to the shadow board satellite surveillance. The financial topic of this subterranean sovereignty was a global paradigm shift. It meant that the Thorn assets could be moved and managed without ever touching the compromised servers of the international banking cartels. The amazing turnaround was a total technological unmasking of the modern elite, who realized that their high-tech spying tools were useless against the century-old logic built on the honesty of the earth. The social injustice of the digital divide in Brussels was the next target of Victor's reclamation. For decades, the De Witt family had restricted high-speed connectivity to the corporate sectors, leaving the artisan and residential districts with outdated and overpriced services. Victor utilized a $40 billion trust to launch the Thorn Open Air Net, a citywide, free, and secure wireless network powered by the kinetic energy of the Thorn-Brussels maglev tracks. The shipping and logistics topic was now a matter of instantaneous integrity, where every small business in Brussels could track their goods across the Thorn-Lee and Thorn-Navarre lines with zero latency. The amazing turnaround was a total democratization of the city's economic potential. The humble clerk had provided the people with the tools to reclaim their own futures, turning the city into a global hub for ethical technology. The terrifying karma was felt in the boardroom of the Shadow Board's telecommunications arm, as they watched their monopoly evaporate in a single afternoon. The psychological unmasking of the De Witt's global director, a man known only as the architect, occurred when he arrived in Brussels in a desperate attempt to negotiate a settlement of silence with Victor. He offered Victor a seat on the Shadow Board and a private island in the Mediterranean, claiming that the $40 billion was just a small change of a much larger global game. But Victor, standing in the dusty archive room where he had spent half his life, didn't even look at the check. He activated the resonance wall of the archives, a series of 1918 acoustic tiles that amplified the sound of the lie. As the architect spoke his false promises, the room began to vibrate with a harsh, discordant noise that made it impossible to breathe. This was the karmic filter Isabella Thorn had designed for the very room where the deeds were filed. The unmasking was visceral and absolute. The architect, stripped of his composure and his fake authority, fled the building as the Thorn Sentinel broadcasted his attempted bribe to every anti-corruption agency in the world. The inevitable karma of the Shadow Board's infinite greed was a total reputational meltdown across the European markets. As the recordings of the archive confrontation were shared, the public realized that the elite were not just thieves of money, but thieves of reality. The financial topic was a total valuation reset, where companies were now judged not by their quarterly earnings, but by their Thorn integrity score. Victor utilized the $40 billion to establish the Global Auditors Guild, a nonprofit organization that provided independent oversight for all major infrastructure projects in Europe. The amazing turnaround was a total victory for the Thorn bloodline. The humble clerk had turned the terrifying karma into a universal standard of truth, proving that the most powerful man in the world is the one who cannot be bought. The 107-year-old journey was reaching its final, glorious resolution in the light of Brussels morning. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The final resolution of the Brussels Gold was a masterpiece of architectural and social alchemy. Victor authorized the construction of the Thorn Pillar of Europe, a monument in the Grand Place that served as the physical anchor for the Thorn Sovereign Network. The pillar was made of recycled steel from the Dawitsi's industrial plants and coated in the Isar alloy from Munich, shimmering with an iridescent light that changed color based on the city's integrity index. The social injustice of the hidden bureaucracy was replaced by a transparency of the light. The $40 billion legacy was no longer a hidden trust, but public utility that powered the dreams of a new generation. Victor sat on a simple stone bench at the base of the pillar, a man who had moved from the shadows of the archive to the center of the world stage, yet his heart remained as humble as the day he filed his first deed. The shipping and logistics topic of the Thorn Empire was now a global circumnavigation of the truth, as the networks of Milan, Shanghai, Barcelona, Munich, Seoul, and Brussels were perfectly synchronized. The amazing turnaround was complete. The 120-year-old dream of Isabella Thorn, to build a world where the honest maid, the abandoned orphan, the denied widow, the tired worker, the loyal driver, and the humble clerk were the rightful masters, was now a physical, breathing reality. The terrifying karma had finished its work, and the justice was absolute. Victor looked up at the Gothic spires of the city, now glowing with the thorn gold, and felt the presence of his ancestors in the silent air. The story of the Thorn family was a finished tapestry, and the final thread was as pure and golden as the soul of the man who had filed the final record. Brussels was a city of the truth, and its justice was eternal. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell.